What is going on, guys? Jack here, and welcome to a Football Manager 2014 tips and tricks video. And today I'm going to be showing you guys how to go about finding the best young prospects in your save using a variety of methods that I have used over my time playing indeed the Championship Manager and the Football Manager series. So yeah, this is a video that's been largely requested. An underlying theme, particularly in my saves, is that I like to rely on younger players, and today I'm going to be showing you guys exactly how to do that. So kicking things off, you can see on screen here that Man City have announced their intake of youth players. For the benefit of this video, I'm going to be using Man City just because they have a fair bit of money, good reputation, and so they make for kind of an easy team to show you what I'm doing. But these same principles can be applied to whatever league you're in with whatever team you're in. So yeah, let's get straight into this. So yeah, what you can see here is that I've had a message come through saying that I've got my new intake of youth players. Just a quick little bit of knowledge, there's something called regen dates. Every player who's new to a save is a regen. Important to note, here I am in 2019. If I show you here, William Durand here is a regen. He's a player with an E-fit face, he's not real. And what regens are players who are produced by the game in order to kind of compensate for players retiring due to old age. So these players are randomly generated, and depending on the nation, they're generated for the team's youth team on varying days. So in this case, in England, the 13th of March is the golden date. For different leagues, it's different dates. I'll have a link down below to a list of all the regen dates. And what I'm now going to do for the English teams, you can do exactly the same for whatever league you're playing in, as well as kind of going through these other countries, regardless of what nation you're in order to potentially find the next hot prospect in that nation. So anyway, my primary way to find players is come regen data, use search filters. So what I've got here is I've actually unticked unrealistic transfers. The reason for this being is sometimes this isn't always accurate. This is something I'd highly recommend you do if you're one of the bigger teams in the nation you're managing in. Maybe not so recommended if you're not a massive team. So anyway, now that we've got this unticked, I've set my age to at most 16. Regens, when they're produced, will age either 15 or 16 generally. There is occasionally players that will appear slightly older, but by having it at most 16, we're going to pretty much narrow this down to mostly regens, with the exception of perhaps a few players who were produced at the age of 15 last year, and so is 16 this year. So the thing that makes regen days so good is the fact that all these players haven't signed professional deals. This means that I can approach these players and offer the contracts, and I have to pay a smaller compensation than the price I'd potentially have to put in to bid for them. So some of these players are fairly greedy, however a lot of these players are very good. So what I tend to do is, as a general kind of ballpark starting point, is I'll just put age at most 16 and I'll sort by value. Value is a fairly solid indication of the top teams of who the best young prospects are. Of course, a player who plays in, say, League One but is potentially a Premier League player isn't going to be as worth as much as the player who's of the same calibre playing in the Premier League, who will be worth more. So here we have Jason Webb. He looks fairly solid. The big attributes I like to look for in my young players are good determination and good physical attributes. The physical attributes are probably more important, as determination can be improved by getting a more experienced player with a better determination to tutor them in taking them under the wing off the field. So what I'm now going to do is I'm actually going to put in a bid for Jason Webb here. He looks pretty solid. I've not scouted him yet, and as you can see here, I'm going to have to pay compensation of 2 million. That's not too bad. What I like to do is I'll stick with their demands in terms of how much money they want, unless it's simply too much for the club to pay. And then what I'll do is I'll say a wage after 30 games, and I'll give them a significant raise. In reality, this guy is 16 years old. The chances of him making 30 league appearances in the first 3 years of his development at my club are pretty slim, and if he was to do that, he's probably worth having on this significantly larger wage. The other thing that this counteracts is the fact that the team who he has been genned at, in this case Chelsea, will offer him a contract pretty much regardless because of how good he is, and so I need to deter him from signing for them. So once I've got a bid that I'm pretty happy with, in this case after 30 games, 28,000, I can suggest this. A few other clauses that you might want to put in is stuff like seasonal landmark goal bonus. Obviously, it's unlikely he's going to score 30 goals in a season, so that can certainly swing things your way. You know, putting in these clauses which look great on paper, but in reality are never going to impact this player. So now that once I've put a bid in for him, I'm now going to scout him. You're going to understand why I've scouted him in a second. but generally I'll go off my own first opinions on a player before kind of scouting them and going in for them. Again, with this guy, he looks fairly solid. Terry Harris, going to scout him, and I'm also going to approach him before I even get the result of the scout report. The reason for this being is the fact that I can actually delay these transfers by a week. This means that I'm given time basically for the scouts to come back and give me their reviews on a player before I sign them. If I was to say stall off, wait for the scout to go, come back to me in say a few days and say this guy is the next Steven Gerrard, that wouldn't be great because the chances are that Liverpool will have already snapped him up. So what I'm doing in putting in a bid is simply kind of, I guess, drawing out the process of him signing for his other club. Cole Holland here was genned in the previous kind of regen window at the age of 15, so I can't put a bid in for him. Unfortunately, there is no easy way to kind of distinguish players who are 16 who were gen the year before. It's just a case of hit and miss. Of course, you can lower the age to 15 and see players here. Players like Sean Taylor here could be very good because Southampton have good facilities. I will come on to that very shortly. But what you can do is you can go for all the players based in your nation. Of course, you can just add the based tag, and from there you can fiddle with filters. The other few filters that I'd like to fiddle with is stuff like adding one attribute very high. So I might put age at most 16, finishing is at least 15, and occasionally you'll have one absolutely insane player who perhaps would have gone under the radar get thrown at you. I don't know how good this Daryl Tarr's going to be. He's been genned at Crewe. Crewe, of course, have very good youth facilities in Football Manager, so it's probably worth just putting in a scout report. As you can see, has very low wage demands. Because he's genned at Crewe, who aren't a massive team, chances are he'll sign for us, and at that compensation it's not too bad. Again, I will wait for the scout report to come back before I put in a bid for him. So say I want to find a defender, I might put tackling and marking at least 13. Of course, it's important to remember that because I play with attribute masking on, I might not have enough scouting knowledge of these players, so if I get rid of one and not the other, I might be able to find some better youth prospects this way, such as this guy, Kieran Judge, but unfortunately for me, as with the other player who was at Chelsea, he's already signed a deal. So none of these players will have signed deals if they've genned on the very first day of the regen day happening. There is no way they will have signed for your club, so there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to put in a bid for them. So I'm going to just stick in some approaches for some of these players. This guy doesn't look particularly good, but I might just get a scout report on him anyway. But you can fiddle with these filters. The other thing I like to do is simply tick every single filter and then set a very low kind of minimum attribute and then kind of play around with the number of attributes to match. What this allows me to do is perhaps find players who aren't particularly a standout player in one attribute, such as finishing, but instead of they're a very well-rounded off player with a lot of potential. So in this case, minimum attribute 10, and then rather than matching all 47, match 12. And from here, I've been throwing some more youth prospects. Of course, you can fiddle with the amount that match until you get players like Ashley Thorne here, who's been thrown out at me, a player who I would have otherwise probably missed. Looks like a fairly good goalkeeper. So what I'm going to do is put in a bid, same as before, minimum wage increase after a certain period of time, and take things from there. So what I'll now do is, guys, I would do this for a very long time. I'd fiddle with filters, find these players who are particularly good prospects, maybe change it to 16 and lower this. You can really kind of fiddle with stuff until you find players that perhaps you would have otherwise not have seen. Fiddle with it, see what's good, but this is a really good way to use the search filters to their best in order to find the players that you're looking for. So we'll put in a bid here for Bill Walters, and I'll show you a few of the methods right now for other ways that you can go about finding players in a similar way to this. So the next way that I can do things, I don't always use this too much, but of course people have their own ways, is you can go to the World tab here, go to transfers, and then where it says all transfers, you can change this to youth intake. This shows you all the big youth intakes that happen at clubs around the world, and occasionally you will find a player who's a very much a standout player. In this case, Alek Harupek. Not necessarily the craziest player in the world, but at that value, it's worth scouting him. Now, unfortunately for me, I've missed the Czech Republic's regen date. Again, that is the advantage of checking every country's regen date. I probably could have got this guy in a compensation, but he's the kind of player who I might not have otherwise seen, and so he's worth putting in a bid or getting a scout report on. So the other way that I like to find players besides using the search filters is to look through teams who are particularly good at producing youth prospects. This is better when you're a team who perhaps are looking at players from abroad. The thing is, in my case, I don't have any scouts currently in foreign countries, so if I search for players, say, under the age of 16 based in France, none are going to come up. So what I can do instead is I can go to the tab here, of course, go to Europe, where are we looking here? Europe. Look for France, got a link for France there, and then I can look through the top French teams to see any youth intakes that they've had that I might have otherwise missed. So I know in this case that France's Regen Day is the 12th of March, so the chances are some of the very hot prospects will have signed professional deals early, such as this guy who looks absolutely insane playing for PSG. But what I can do is I can go through each team in, say, France in this case is academies, scout the players, do the exact same thing where I put in a bid for a player, with the intentions of delaying it until I've got a scout report on them, but it just ensures that they don't sign for their main team. So once I've done this, obviously I could go through every country. I could then go to Spain. Say it was the Brazilian Regen Day, I'd go to the Brazil teams and look at their youth academies, and that can be a pretty useful way to find players abroad who are particularly good youth prospects. Again, I like to search by age in this case and look at it this way. So anyway, the final way that I tend to look for players is actually using the national sides. This is one that some people use, some people don't, and I actually really recommend you do this because you can often find bargains whilst not necessarily on their region date. Particularly in South America, I found a hell of a lot of crazy young talent just kind of lurking around for fairly cheap. So what I'll do is I'll go to the country's under 20 squad, search reverse by age, just see who comes up. As you can see here, no particularly underrated players. Of course, you can check the under 23s to see if perhaps there's an insane regen who's just launched straight into the first team. In Brazil's case, there simply isn't. Then what I'll do is I'll just hit the down tab and I'll start flicking through nations. So I'm in Chile now. Two players here who have kind of caught my eye. We have here Leandro Rocco. Looks like he could be a pretty good talent. I'll get a scout report on him, see how good he is. We've got Diego Andia here. Looks like he could potentially be a good player. Again, in this case, I'm not going to put a bid in for these players because there's not much point, because it's not like there's a window of opportunity to sign them because they've just been genned in. These are players already in the game. You will find players who haven't signed professional deals who are potentially steals. As in this case, not every team will offer a player a contract when they're genned in, so occasionally you can find kind of a hidden gem, particularly when looking through these youth teams. And what I'll do is I'll go through every continent and look at every young player. This can take an hour or two or three, and I'll literally look through every one of these guys. So Eduardo Leon doesn't look too bad of a player. I'm going to get a scout report on him. We'll see if he's got more to offer. Of course, the attribute masking kind of limits how much I can see of him, but for a 16-year-old to be playing in the Peru's under 21 side, he's got to be half decent. And what I'll do from here is I'll just flick through every single nation, look at their youth prospects, see who their top young players are, see if any are particularly good and have flown under the radar of opposition teams. One of my favourite nations to do this in is actually, favourite continents I should say, is actually Asia. You can find some very good Asian regens. Of course, flick through the different teams, the under-22s, the under-21s and the under-20s are usually the place to be. But you can flick through these, see who's appearing, see if there's any players who are particularly young who are appearing, playing for their team. China seem to have had a bit of a buff this year in terms of the regions that they can produce. And what I'll do from here is I'll look through the senior squads as well. In this case, we've got Yang Guanglong. Doesn't look like too bad of a player. Might be worth a scout. And this is really what you have to do. Patience is a virtue. The longer you take to look for regens, the better players you will have. So from here, I'd look through these players. When I've put in my bids, I'd advance a day. When all the deals have almost gone through on the players, I'd then hit delay, wait for the scout to come back, and then make a decision on whether or not to sign a player. In this case, I've actually got a match. I'm actually going to holiday over it and hope that the players don't all sign for me. And I could show you a little bit about what I was talking about when I was talking about delaying the transfers. And as I kind of worried, a lot of these players have just signed straight for my youth team without me being able to scout them. As you can see here though, some of these players who didn't sign immediately, I get their scout reports before they've come, and I'm able to kind of look at them and decide whether or not they're worth signing. So particularly players who are in the kind of South American countries, you can see how good they are. and then make a decision on whether or not to put in a bid. Unfortunately here it doesn't look like any of the players I found in kind of that 5 minutes of searching were particularly good. As for the players that did sign for the team, we can probably take a look at them here in the under 21s. Would they be in there, or have they been put in the senior squad? Let's find out. Looks like they've been put in the under 20. Oh wait, no they haven't. I forgot to mention this. Players that you sign outside the transfer window, so of course in England's case the transfer window is closed when Regen Day is. They won't transfer until the end of the season. So you can see here a few of these players signing for us. Ashley Fawn looked like a particularly good one. He was the keeper who kind of flew under the radar until I started fiddling around with the search filters a little bit more. Has a very low value at Chelsea, but 4.5 potential ability is very good, and he could become a star Premier League keeper. And what we've just done there is we've signed potentially England's #1 for the next however many years for just under £1 million. And this is how you can do it. So you can save so much time and so much money by getting these players when they're young, signing them in. Players like Ashley Fawn, who's going to be joining us. Bill Walters looked like a fairly solid player. England centre attacking mid at 16 years old, 4.5 star, potential ability, good determination, good physicals. And this is what I do. I spend so much time and I cannot appreciate and kind of, what's the word? I cannot, I'm trying to think now, cannot stress this enough, I suppose. Take your time, look for players, do the methods I've said, check regen dates for various countries and search their country's players. Use the search filters to the best of your ability. Look at the world signings and youth intakes. Search for teams prone to produce. And what I mean by that is, when it's French regen day, go and check out PSG, Lyon, Lille, the countries with really good facilities. When it's England regen day, go check out the Crews and the Middlesbroughs. When it's the Croatian day, you know, go and check out the Hajduk Split squad and the Dynamo Kiev teams. You know, see, that's a Ukrainian, Jack. It doesn't matter. Basically, the point I'm trying to make is you have to take your time. You have to know the regen dates. You can set reminders in game, which are incredibly useful. And just be persistent. Be persistent. Keep an eye out on players. If a player looks half decent, but perhaps you don't want to take a punt on him, just wait a little bit. See what happens. Obviously, the other thing is looking through national sides. That's a very good method for doing things. And all in all, the harder you search and the longer you spend looking for players, the better results you will undoubtedly get. If I just show you here, I'm hoping this is going to be the case, but I've done an advance of 1 day after Regen Day, and I can pretty much guarantee you that some of the best young prospects who I eyed up before will have now signed professional deals. So if I put at most is 16, reverse value, and then we look at someone like, I'm trying to think who we looked at, Tom James, who I tried to sign before. Actually, I can still approach him even though he's not signed. But essentially, there is a window of opportunity and you can miss it. Bit upsetting that I can't sign this Tom James guy because he could be John Thames guy. It really should be Tom James. That would make so much more sense. I would nickname him if he was my save. But really just take your time, look for players, look for the best prospects. And that is it. I will just quickly show you guys my Wolves side, and the reason that I will show you my Wolves side is because I want to show you guys how this has got me where it's got me. So for those of you who don't know, I stream occasionally on Twitch, not as much as I'd like at the moment, but it's certainly something that I'm looking to do come the end of January when I'm back at my university accommodation. But this is an example of what you can do when you really are persistent with players a number of years. The year is 2020 and I won the Premier League with Wolves. If I just show you the history tab here for Wolverhampton Wanderers, you can see how I progressed through the leagues, and it took me 5 seasons in the Premier League to win the league, and this was done mostly relying on regens to kind of get us where we got us. If I show you my top players, my side, all the players are pretty much regens with the exception of 2. You've got players like the great Wu Jiaming, this guy 24 years old goalkeeper. I signed this guy on a free 2 years ago, being persistent. I eyed him up, and then he became a free agent and I was able to sign him. You look at players like Warner Soto, this guy, I signed on a free from Dnipro, I think that's how you say them. These guys are a random team in Ukraine, but I took the time to look for this guy. He came in on a free and he's now my captain. The reality of this is, guys, just search. You will find good players at every club eventually. My two centre-backs, or my main centre-backs, I have Junior here, 21 years old. This guy, probably the best centre-back in the world, came in for £2.2 million compensation 4 years ago. And then you look at the likes of players like Ronaldo, another amazing defensive player. This guy, he joined me on a free 2 years ago. You have to search for players. Sometimes a young player won't be sold by their team because you've missed the regen window and the other club want too much. Just keep an eye out on them. They will eventually drop in price. But this is what can happen. Alexandre Boulanger, insane player. This guy, one of the best players in the world. You can see his stats there. Joined me on a free 4 years ago, and he's developed so much. If you can get these young players in at a young age, stick them in your under-21s and develop them in a very positive manner, give them lots of first team football, you can win the league with a very young side on Football Manager. Enrique is probably my biggest youth prospect here. This guy, I hate to admit it, I spent 45 million on this guy, but the reason I was able to do that was because I've stacked up my youth team, if I show you here, with so many prospects that are going to get sold on for money and profit because they're not going to make it in the first team. And this is how you can really start to make money in FM. Get your young players in on the cheap early, sell them on for money. If I show you my transfer centre history with Wolves, just quickly, you can turn your club into a conveyor belt of selling lots of players for very good money. You can see here £73 million made off selling players. And honestly, players like Valderrama at £27 million for a regen. He was 23 years old. I found him a few years ago and signed him for £6 million. Paid a little bit much for him, but I found him of my own accord in Mexico. I've sold him on for £27 million to Porto a few years later. So this is what you can achieve using my methods. I'm not going to say, hey, I have the best methods ever. I'm sure people have their own way of finding regens. Like in real management, everyone has their own ways of doing things. These are mine, just showing you guys a few of my little secrets. These are the kind of results you can get with it. I wish you good luck on your regen hunting kind of quest. If this video has helped you, please smash the like button. If you've got any queries about finding regens, maybe something that I've said in the video and you want to ask more about it, feel free to down below. I reply and read all comments as and when necessary. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching. It is me, Jack, and I'll talk to you guys in a bit. I'm out.